Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from FantasyFootballScout.co.uk. My name is David and today we're going to have a look at how my team got on in Gameweek 8, which of course feels like a very long time ago, but more importantly we're going to have a look at what my plans are for Gameweek 9. That's right, the international break, the October edition is nearly at an end and couldn't come sooner, Gameweek 9 to be honest, and here we are getting ready for that Saturday 11 a.m. UK time deadline. It's back and we're ready to pick our teams for that deadline. But there is lots to talk about, lots of decisions to make. I know some of you are on wildcards, for example. Been lots of talk about making sure you've got the right captain. Well, how many transfers should we spend on making that happen? Should we keep Spurs players? Should we trust Wolves players? Lots and lots of questions swirling about, and so I thought I'd try and cut through a lot of that noise by letting you know what I'm thinking of doing with my team, because it's not just about all those questions with me. I've only got a very few specific issues, so it's a much easier job than going into all those other questions. However, don't worry, we've got all of them covered across the Fantasy Football Scout brand over the last couple of weeks, whether it's articles, videos, or podcasts that you follow us on. We've got coverage across all of those that should help answer some of those questions for you. So go back over the YouTube channel, on the podcast especially, as in I know what we've got there, because I've been the one making it. So if you have a look for Pedro Neto, Cole Palmer, a couple of transfer tips around Man United as well. We've looked at captaincy with the general. Go back and have a look on the Game Week 9 and the October International Break playlist. And if there's anything that's not covered here, because it doesn't really affect my team, you can be sure that it will be covered there. And hopefully you'll have your questions answered. Now, before we get much further, as always, there's a bit of housekeeping to do. And we'll start off with the membership, because I have it on good authority that time is running out for you to get that 30% discount on those pre-season prices for membership. A lot of the numbers that I talk through on these videos, of course, are from the members area. And so if you ever feel like you need a break from my voice or my face when accessing this information, then membership is a good way to sort that out, because then you can have a look, answer these questions on your own without the need for me. Now, also, we have a message from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Betway, the principal betting partners of West Ham and of Brighton. On Fridays, they announced the heroes of the weekend. Bet £10 on Player Market's top scorer of the heroes, and they will credit a £1 free bet for every point up to £20. Betway are also running giveaways, including shirts and tickets for West Ham and Brighton. We know that not everyone gambles, and that's something we take very seriously, which is why on our website we have a filter that you can turn on, which allows you to opt out of gambling ads. For those who do so responsibly and safely, there's more info on Betway in the description. You have to be 18 or over to play, and we encourage everybody to gamble responsibly and to be gambleaware.org. When the fun stops, stop. Now, let's move back on to how my team got on in Game Week 8, which does feel like a long time ago. And don't worry, I'm not going to spend too long on this, because I appreciate it was a while ago, but it's just to give you an idea of where my team is at. So I had Turner in goal for 6 points, Anderson in goal for 6 points. It was the most cheered 0-0 I've ever been involved in, to be honest. In terms of covering that, I was very, very happy, even if it made some people genuinely ill with how boring it was. Van de Ven got me 15 points. A lot of jam there. I had some people ask me what thought process went into having him, wondering if perhaps I'd unpicked some hidden piece of information about him. Well, it simply was that I couldn't afford Udogie or Porro, and I thought I was going into that game week a little bit short-handed with just a centre-back who'd had one shot in the last 4 matches, so I got very lucky there. I will appreciate that. 2 points from Cash, 6 from Maddison, 2 from Mbeumo, 2 for Diaby, 15 from Salah, 6 for Son as my captain, so 3 really, Alvarez 2, Haaland 2, and then it was Flecken, Archer, Estupiñán and Botman on the bench. Now, it has been a difficult time of injuries of late, and I did come into this game week littered with flags, and I resolved a couple of them by getting rid of Chilwell to get Van de Ven, and then of course I moved on one of my other midfielders to get to Son. It was Saka, of course, so injury flags on both of those. Felt that they were unlikely to be involved in Game Week 8, neither of them were, so I'm quite happy with how that went. I mean, certainly with Van de Ven, I was up I think 21 points because Saka and Chilwell weren't involved. Now, the question is what my plan is now that I don't have Saka. So here is my Game Week 9 team at the moment. And to be honest, I'm not going to get Saka back in yet, I don't think, because I'd like to wait until Game Week 10. And Game Week 10, as we're going to have a look at in a minute, because we're going to have a look at the fixtures, I think there's more opportunities to swing towards a different direction for my team now than there would be in Game Week 10 than there would be now, because of the way that the fixtures have lined up. So I'm hoping that I can roll a transfer to enable me to do a little bit of minor surgery to get Saka back into my team. However, standing in the way of maybe being able to do that at the moment is one Newcastle defender in the shape of Sven Botman. So what you'll see on the screen right now is my team as I've currently got it for game week 9 with Botman in the starting 11, but with an orange flag. He's currently at 50%. So what that means for the rest of the team, I've gone for Turner over Flecken in goal, Botman, Van de Ven, Cash, Maddison and Burmo, Diaby, Salah, Son as the midfield 5, Alvarez and Haaland up front with the armband on the Norwegian, and then a bench of Archer, Anderson and Estupiñán. So that's what I'm looking at the moment. Now, the problem is that I've got is that if Botman is unable to play in game week 9 in this home game against Crystal Palace, then I'm a little bit short-staffed, because that would mean having to, if I wanted to roll my transfer, I would have to bring Anderson off the bench and start him away against Newcastle. Now, Crystal Palace's defence has been very good this year, but Newcastle's attack has been exceptionally good. Anderson has rewarded me a number of times in situations I didn't expect him to. Had him since the summer, I've had him since game week 1, so it's been nice to have him around, getting these 15 pointers away at Man United, places you don't expect it to happen. But if there's place I really don't expect it to happen, it is St James's Park, where Newcastle have been particularly good this season. So I don't really want to have to rely on that. Now, if Botman is ruled out, then I am going to have to start making decisions about whether or not starting an Anderson, who might even get negative points against Newcastle the way that they are attacking this season, whether or not that's really worth the 2 free transfers going into next week. And yeah, at the moment, I'm fairly confident that I'm going to be okay, because the latest update from Botman, we haven't heard from Eddie Howe yet, but reading on the Newcastle Chronicle in the last few days, Botman has posted on his social media to say that he is going to be coming back stronger than ever, and seems like in a positive place during the international break, and the suggestion seems to be that as soon as he's fit, he will walk back into the team. So that's good news for me, but I do really need Eddie Howe to confirm it. If he doesn't, then I may have to look at the fixtures and think about what defenders I want moving forward. So I'll just quickly switch to the season ticker now. And it is a bit of a tricky one. It is a bit of a difficult situation working out who to move him towards. Aston Villa top the season ticker for the next 6, but I've already got a Villa defender in cash. West Ham are second in this run, but they have a very leaky defence at the moment. Liverpool is a decent opportunity, but I need to kind of see what's available in terms of, we've heard that Robertson might be out for actually about up to 10 weeks now. So Shimikas is a possibility of moving Estupiñán to him, because I think the Botman's not going to be out for much longer. If he misses game week 9, I think he's back for game week 10. And of course, Newcastle away at Wolves then, so I really do want him. Now, Trippier is worth pointing out that Newcastle are 5th highest on the season ticker over the next 6. I haven't got Trippier right now. I think he's a great option. Can I get to him? Not really. I'm quite happy with Salah as the alternative to him. If you want more of an understanding of why it's Salah versus Trippier right now, go back and watch last week's episode of General's Orders, where we compared my no Trippier team with Mark's no Salah team, and it was quite an interesting comparison. That seems to be they're the 2 players that stipulate which path players managers are going to pick from. So I can't get to Trippier, and I think getting to Trippier would break my team, and I think I just have to accept that I'm not going to have him. So it does mean that my replacements for Botman in the starting 11, or rather Estupiñán, are somewhat limited. But at the same time, do I really want to sell Estupiñán either? This is what I mean about, do I really want to be making transfers? Brighton, of course, are away at Man City in game week 9. But if Estupiñán is back for either Fulham at home, Everton away, Sheffield United at home, or Nottingham Forest away, I want to make sure that I can field him for those fixtures, because I think that Brighton will do very well there. Their fixtures are about to swing back in an enormously positive direction, which brings me on to some other decisions in my team. You will, of course, notice that Mbeumo is still there. He hasn't done anything. I think he's blanked in 5 of the last 6 or something crazy like that. We did a video on him a couple of weeks ago about what's going on with Brentford, and I think that they've suffered a little bit from losing Rico Henry on the left-hand side. That has stunted the creative output a little bit. Of course, it's stunted their defensive potential as well, which sometimes, conceding goals and the team going 1 or 2-0 down can also stunt the creativity moving forward as well. So there's a little bit of that involved. I do, however, think that this game week against Burnley, this is when it's surely get something here. I think this is going to be a last chance saloon for Mbeumo. I think no matter what he does, whether he returns or gets nothing, next week I'm probably going to be moving him on to a Brighton midfielder, probably in the form of Matoma. Because if we'll just go back to the season ticker, I mentioned earlier on about where are the swings here? Where are the big opportunities for switching my team up? And I look at the game week 9 fixtures, and I really think that it's a case of you've just got to wait one more week before you make a lot of surgery, because Brighton, for example, let's use them again. 4 fantastic fixtures from game week 10 onwards, but they've got to get Man City away from home out of the way first. Now, Crystal Palace. Now, I don't have... I already have a Crystal Palace defender, and so I'm not going to be buying one. But in terms of advice for other people, I think you need to have a Crystal Palace defender at some point. But you don't want him in game week 9. You don't want him in game week 10 because that's Newcastle away and Spurs at home. But then Burnley away, Everton at home, Luton away. Game weeks 11 through 13, having a Crystal Palace defender is going to be worth having. To be honest, having a Crystal Palace midfielder in that run might also be useful because it could just about coincide with when Eze and Elise come back, and they have actually been very, very attacking when they've been able to field Elise, Eze and Odsonne Edouard in the last few months, back towards the back end of last season and the start of this one. So, I want to be able to make sure that I'm poised and ready to invest there. West Ham is another team. A few people already have Ward-Prowse and already have Bowen. I've got in my team, of course, Mbermo, and I've also got Diaby, and I've also got Maddison and Son, players who I'm sort of thinking about when can I jump off them when their fixtures get tricky. Well, Crystal Palace hosting Spurs in game week 10, then it's Chelsea. So those 2 fixtures are hard for Spurs, where West Ham get Everton at home and Brentford away. But West Ham have Aston Villa away in game week 9. So there's just more opportunities to swing towards a better team in game week 10, and not least with Arsenal. They're away to Chelsea in game week 9. They're at home against Sheffield United in game week 10. They're at home against Burnley in game week 12. So Saka is a fantastic captaincy option for game weeks 10 and 12. I don't have him right now. But would I want to bring him immediately back in this week when Son is probably the most likely player that I can get rid of to get Saka back in, and of course this week Spurs are at home to Fulham. So it means that I just want to try and preserve my team as best I can so that I can have 2 free transfers to go into next week and make more changes. Now, who those changes might be remains to be seen. I need to see the game week 9 data get fed into the pot, and then I can make some of those decisions. But I'm not ruling out things like an Alvarez to a Watkins. Son to Saka seems quite likely, and Burmo to Matoma seems quite likely. We'll see what the prognosis is on Botman, for example. Would I have to maybe, if he suffers a setback or something, would I have to maybe move him to a Burn, something like that? We also need to kind of get more of an update from De Zerbi on when Estupiñán is going to be back. They were talking about a month, about 2 weeks ago, I think it was. And so in 2 weeks' time, we're going to see him perhaps maybe involved in the Fulham game or the Everton game away. If he's going to be away for longer than that, then he's someone who's got to go. And so I just need an opportunity to allow some of my team's decisions just to kind of breathe a bit longer before I make the jump. And I feel very fortunate with the fact that the fixtures are aligned in such a way that there's, in my opinion, not too much desperation to change things from the way things currently are. Flecken's also on the bench. He's got a flag as well. Handily enough, Nottingham Forest have a few fixtures over the next few weeks, which I'm happy to start Turner in, not least at home to Luton in game week 9, home to Everton in game week 14 as well. It is going to be a bit tricky between this rotation between now and then. It was working really nicely at the start of the season, and their fixtures are sort of, getting a bit stale now. If I find myself with a spare transfer here and there, I could potentially bring in Areola to rotate with one of them, for example. Or, I'm not ruling out getting a second Crystal Palace defender, to be honest, in the form of Sam Johnston. So there's possibilities there, but I'm kind of going on too long now. The general point is, my team as it currently stands, as long as Botman is fit, I think is ready for game week 9. And even if you're sat there still with a couple of flags, I think look at your team, have a look at what you could do with it this week and what you could do with it next week. And guaranteed, I think more often than not with the teams out there, I think there's going to be more opportunity for you to switch things up and really gear towards some big upsides in a Saka captaincy in game week 10, for example. Moving on Son for those 2 really tricky fixtures to make that happen, or maybe moving on Son to get Salah in for Forest at home, Luton away, when Spurs are facing Crystal Palace away, Chelsea at home. Really chase some upside with your team by chopping and changing a couple of those bigger players. That's going to be easier to do if you've got those 2 free transfers, because some of those moves I mentioned there would require a little bit of surgery. So yeah, have a think about whether or not you can do that. It's definitely something I'm going to be doing with my team. Now, I always in these videos like to go through some of my favourite stats over the last couple of weeks just to help guide me towards some of these sound decisions. So we'll start off with teams that have been defending well over the last 4 matches. Newcastle have conceded the fewest big chances of any team in the last 4 matches, but Chelsea are also joint second best alongside Man City. And that's why when I see Arsenal and Spurs facing them in the next couple of weeks, it does make me feel like my attacking assets against the Blues are going to have a harder time of it than people think. I keep saying it, I'm probably a broken record. If you've not already heard me say this, I'm going to say it for your benefit. Chelsea's results this season haven't been great, especially in front of opposition goals, and it's kind of masked the fact that defensively they've actually not been too bad, and people who've had Colwill for quite some time have noticed that, because we've had Chilwell and we've had problems with him and he hasn't got points and he hasn't got clean sheets when his colleagues have, that also masks from the fact that Chelsea defensively haven't really been too bad. So it's definitely worth noting that. Now, in terms of defenders I could switch to, Arsenal have some nice fixtures as well. I could maybe see if I could get Gabriel back in and use him as part of a rotation. I would rather use him as a rotating asset because of the way that Arsenal's fixtures run over the next couple of weeks. They've got a hard one and then an easy one and then a hard one and then an easy one. So I don't really want to be starting someone for all of those, but it's nice to see that they are within the top 6 for fewest big chances conceded over the last 4. So it could provide some benefit. Now, the defences to target, of course, Sheffield United remain one of those. So if you've got United players, holding on to them is going to be sensible. Aston Villa going up against a West Ham defence that has been very, very obliging so far. Bournemouth, Burnley, Wolves and Luton complete the bottom 6. And just going back to my Burmo decision there, holding him for this game against Burnley seems quite sensible thing to do, because they're in the bottom 4 for expected goals conceded in the last 4. Let's move on to players now. Who's been the most creative? Well, as I mentioned before, it's either no Trippier or no Salah with most people. We, on the General's Order show, kind of came to the conclusion it's probably much of a muchness, because if you have a look at the screen right now, they are the 2 players top of the league for big chances created over the last 4. It means they're basically as creative as each other. Trippier creates more chances than Salah does, but in terms of the quality of chances, they both create the same. Maddison and McNeil are level on 4 apiece, and then we've got Anthony Gordon, Rashford, Palmer and Kulusevski all on 3 each. Couple of things in there. It shows you that Rashford has some decent assist potential because he gets into good positions and creates big chances. That's going to be good for you if you're holding him against Sheffield United. And some people still having a look at maybe going for Gordon or Neto. Neto has been more creative across the course of the whole season. Gordon has been more creative in his last 4. Let's move on to shots in the box now. And once again, Rashford still poking his head up above the parapet saying, hey, what about me? I've got a good fixture coming up this week and I've at least been trying to get some points. Only Watkins has had more shots in the box than Rashford in the last 4. Rashford had the same number as Haaland and, of course, the big man Carlton Morris as well. Nunez, also worth pointing out, he's had more shots in the box than Salah of late. We understand that he's back in training after the international break late fixture for Uruguay. They won 2-0 against Brazil, by the way. Their first win in that fixture for something like 2 decades in the World Cup qualifiers. So he's in particularly fine fettle, having scored in that game. And his Premier League underlying statistics have also been very good. And Ollie Watkins, of course, topping this chart, 15 shots in the box in the last 4. Villa continue to top the season ticker. West Ham at home, Luton at home, Forest away, Fulham at home, Spurs away, but then Bournemouth away again. Really nice fixtures for Aston Villa. So if you haven't got a Diaby or a Cash or Watkins, you need to get one of them fairly soon. Watkins kind of proving himself to be the biggest of the goal-scoring threats out of those guys. Now, the accuracy is also in his favour as well. He's had 7 shots on target. The former Brentford and Exeter City striker, he has had 7, level with Isak, Son and Callum Wilson and Bruno Fernandes. And so just bringing it back round to that Sheffield United fixture, if I had Fernandes or Rashford in my team, I would be holding them for this game, because I do think it's going to end particularly nastily for Sheffield United and therefore provide some points for the Red Devils. Haaland, Willian, Eze and Gross are the 4 guys tied on 6 shots on target each over the last 4 matches. Haven't really talked about Haaland too much in this video, or even really talked about much about the captaincy. I think I'm fairly settled on having Haaland as the captain for this one, bearing in mind that 2 of the 4 matches in this run involved Man City really not being at their best, and it being very clear that was because Rodri wasn't around. If you want more information on that, I did a video last week on Erling Haaland, yes or no, in our teams, and was able to dive down really deep into the impact that Rodri had on the Man City underlying statistics, both as a team but also for Haaland himself when he was and was not there. And so the fact that across this period Haaland has had just 1 shot in his last 2 and is still in the upper echelons of these goal threat statistics for the 4-match period is quite ominous. The fact that despite that dip in the last 2, if you look at the season as a whole, he's still absolutely top of the division for shots in the box, big chances and shots on target. He's a huge goal threat. He's ready to explode. Pep is going to be, like a wounded animal whenever Man City lose a game, and they've lost 2 in a row now. He usually come back with a bang. Rodri coming back into the mix is going to make a big difference. And Brighton haven't really been too sound defensively this season. So for me, it's a fairly easy one to captain Haaland. You can see from these two tables here that he is a bigger goal threat than Salah, even though Salah is a bigger assist threat than him. Everton have been improving of late. We saw that Everton weren't in the bottom 6 for expected goals conceded over the last 4 anymore, having set themselves up, almost paid themselves a mortgage in the first 4 game weeks of the season. There's been some big improvements, and it's a derby day. I'm a bit nervous. I don't like captaining Liverpool players at home against Everton because you just never know which Toffee's team is going to turn up. And there's just there's an inkling at the back of my mind that there's a chance that Everton can come along across Stanley Park and frustrate things. So, yeah, I'm not saying that Liverpool won't destroy them. I'm not saying that Salah isn't going to get a big double-figure haul, but it's all about the probabilities. And I just think there's just a higher probability that Haaland is going to smash things up against Brighton than... Salah against Everton. I've also got Son as well. We've seen him in these charts. 9 shots in the box in the last 4 big chances, 7 on target. Problem here is I'm happy to own him, and so I'm not saying he's a bad asset, but when you're picking your captain, you've got to be ruthless. For me, a home game against Fulham smacks too much of a home game against Sheffield United a couple of weeks ago. We've definitely seen that in away games, Son is going to have more opportunities to shoot. His underlying statistics have been better away from home, even if his returns haven't on the whole been as good away from home, but more likely to see him do well away from home against teams that are going to give a little bit of space. Would be very shocked if Fulham don't come to the Spurs stadium, stick everyone behind the ball, deny Spurs the space. Bernd Leno puts in a blinder, and Son spends a lot of the game having to drop deep to create chances for himself. That's what we saw with Sheffield United. The blueprint is there. Fulham, I think, a better place to deploy it than Sheffield United are because I think they're better defensively. So there's just enough of a niggling doubt at the back of my mind that could happen for Spurs at home. And so it just makes Haaland rise above those two much more easily. So yeah, that's my captaincy decision for Game Week 9. I'm not against rotating him for the next couple of weeks. If you want more details on my plans for that, go and watch the latest episode of General's Orders if you've still got time before the deadline, because myself and Mark talked about that in great detail. So yeah, do go and check that out. As I mentioned at the beginning, time is running out on your opportunity to get 30% off on the preseason prices for Fantasy Football Scout membership. Go and have a look. There's a link in the description, and also go to the website as well. Have a look at the different packages and pick one that is right for you. But with that, I shall leave you fine folks to enjoy the last of your preparation for Game Week 9, and I shall see you next time. Goodbye.